BCA-101, Introduction to Computers and Information Systems. Alright, we started Unit 3. I did a little overview in the previous podcast, but we'll touch upon a couple things. Today, we're going to talk about computing devices. And we should be able to identify at least somewhat the difference between various computing devices. And we're going to talk about the more obvious ones that we deal with as a whole, even though there are computing devices everywhere in our world, including our automobiles, our microwaves, or maybe our watches. It could be all kinds of places. All right. So we talked about code, and I think it's important to understand what binary digits are. And we will be talking about those throughout the entire course. Better understanding that information, data I should say, for example, is represented by ones and zeros. Usually 8 bits gives us a byte, and different things are stored different ways. For example, we use ASCII code to store text information. Numerics are stored differently. Dates are usually stored as numbers. And then we have a way to store video, voice, sound, etc., etc. For example, this. Everything I'm doing here is being stored in some particular format, which allows me to put it up on YouTube. We talk about word size. And the importance there is if you're going to download some software, you have an idea if your machine has a certain word size, so that when you download the software, you download the one that best takes advantage of your machine. Being pretty blunt. This is bit rate. You don't hear people talk about bit rate per se, but it's how many, and we use typically bits per second, how many bits we can move between two devices. And we'll talk more later on about what maybe is heard more often is the bandwidth. Now, today, types of computers, computing devices, however you might want to term it. So, mobile devices are ones we're allowed to move around with. Most of them that we talk about have a capability to connect via some frequency to some kind of receiver, like what we'll learn later, an access point, or you'll hear like at McDonald's or whatever, they'll call it a hotspot. But it allows you to connect to their service provider, their internet service provider. And then there's also another means that's different that allows them to connect to either a 3G or maybe a 4G, depending on the technology being used. You hear about LTE, which is really popular now. That's really different than using Wi-Fi, and we'll emphasize that. But the whole idea are the devices are mobile and typically small, so we can manage them. So you can look these all up. They're pretty commonly used. We'll start off. Smartphones. They're phones that not only allow you to do cell connections in which you can talk or you can text. You shouldn't confuse. Texting is really different than if you're doing something via data. Data, you access some web server, let's just say, and you get the weather. Or you access your Facebook account, or maybe you tweet, if that's the correct term, but I think most people know what we mean. So this is all using data on the device, which is different It's different how it occurs, the technology of the cellular concept. We talk more specifically about cellular later on. But anyway, smartphones. And they typically, they have a processor. They have a processor, and then they have memory. And they typically, as far as I know, don't have a hard drive. But you look up the specifics of that when you look up smartphones. Now, tablets is this concept of a little bit bigger device, and typically they can do the same thing. They can have a data plan, or they may not. They may not have a data plan. It depends on what you want to do. They typically have a screen that's usually bigger than your smartphone, and they allow you to do similar things to a smartphone. And they too have a processor and memory that communicate together. These are all Wi-Fi capable also, just like a smartphone. Wi-Fi capable. So your smartphone could connect to a local Wi-Fi, or they can connect to their 3G or 4G connection. Now tablets, same thing. They can connect the data through a 3G, 4G, or they can connect to the Wi-Fi. And in some cases, only Wi-Fi. The tablet I have, that I'm doing this work on right now, the iPad, I only use it to connecting to Wi-Fi. We do not have a data plan for it. I added readers this year to the outline, things like the Kindle and some of those type of devices, which act a lot like tablets. They act a lot like tablets, but they're not designed maybe to do everything a tablet does. Netbooks were popular for a short period of time, in which they were really just very portable or very small, light, long battery life laptops. They had a processor and memory and small hard drive, etc., etc. Did not seem to catch on because there's lots of other devices to do the same thing. Plus, laptops themselves, a little bit bigger device than a netbook, are still extremely popular. They typically have a keyboard people like to use, and then you can get a wide range of different sizes in terms of you can go economical, have a laptop at home that costs less than $400 and it's fairly powerful. You can get a laptop for $3,000 that has lots of capabilities, great resolution, lots of power. Okay, so we got that wide range of laptops nowadays. Typically, big differences. A laptop, they all allow us to connect a wired connection. A lot of them have USB. The newer ones now would have an HDMI connection. So they are going to have more capabilities than a tablet in those situations. You store a lot of your software and so forth on the hard drive in the laptops. Not always, but typically. So they are a different niche maybe than a tablet would have. Now, a big step in terms of laptops, for example, there's a device out. Microsoft has the Surface Pro. It is very similar to a laptop in terms as it has some ports, more ports than a tablet and so forth, but it can easily be turned around and used as a tablet. So you're starting to see a mix between these two because of the OSs. When we talk more specifically about OSs, one of the key things for the operating system is to allow you to interface with the device and touch the screen and move stuff and write on the screen like I'm doing right now. It's becoming very popular, so you're starting to see this. So you're seeing that not just in Surface, but you can see in a lot of laptops now that are produced are still more traditional laptop, but they allow you to touch and move the screen, especially with the new OS, for example, Windows 8, allowing you to have the best of both worlds, so to speak. And we'll learn more later on about the difference, why one would be better than another. All right, moving on. Better keep going here. Even though the sales of desktop workstations, now they don't have to sit on the desktop. The idea is here you have a box. Then you typically have your monitor and keyboard and stuff separate. And so the box is stationary. You put it in an office, in a location, your house or wherever, and typically stays there. Okay? Now, why would somebody want something stationary when they could buy a similar device being portable? You can get a lot more machine for your money with a desktop than you can because you pay for the portability of a laptop. It's really important to sort out. If you're going to be doing some work, like you're doing a lot of programming, a lot of gaming and so forth, right in your house, a lot of people would just get themselves a very good desktop workstation type computer and be able to buy a lot more processing power, which we learn about in this course as we go along, actually in this unit. This unit isn't necessarily always the funnest for students, but anyway, we'll learn some of those things and we'll try to understand that. Now, servers can be desktop or workstations. They sit right there. They just have bigger everything, maybe a bigger hard drive and faster processor, maybe faster bus and so forth, which we talk about. And they have a particular task, like to be maybe serve up web pages, so it'd be web server. Some store data, like at the college, we have a U drive in our area, or the students will store something on the H drive. So the computer doing that can be a data server. You can have apps on a server, and we could go on and on and on. Okay? Now, also servers, they can also be mounted in a rack. Okay? Mounted in a rack. High-powered computers to do specific tasks, and we have virtualization, which we talked briefly about later on. A step up from that, this would be more powerful, bigger, might actually be the size of a desk. Mini computers, they're just more powerful, they have more memory, faster processing internally, and so forth, used for bigger tasks. Like running a company and so forth. Mainframes, they're a step up from the mini computers, and you can look them up and get more information. They're larger devices to do large tasks. Probably not as many of them being made anymore in their usage, but they still exist. There was a mainframe built back in the days when Unisys was still in Clear Lake, and an individual from there actually delivered it to Disney World down in, or Disneyland, whichever one's in Florida. And they use a computer from there to run large things, like running a whole theme park or running a large factory or whatever. Supercomputers are machines that are extremely fast, extremely expensive, and they're used for doing broadcasting long-term things, like what would happen if we had a nuclear bomb go off, or what's the weather going to be like that has thousands of variables coming in, and it has to produce some answer coming out very quickly. Not a lot of computers in the world, supercomputers, but there's ones used for various things in terms of very needing lots of computing power. Might fill up a room or a half a room. All right. So as we cover the next parts in this, we're going to be referring back to how the, if we were to take a look here as we start talking about hardware specifics. and all of these things dealing with computing. We're going to take and talk about how these relate to the different devices and why we get the performance we might get out of a computer, and why we would choose one over another, etc., etc., etc. And we'll have the students working on those different types of computers in groups, deciding what to get, what applications, what operating systems, and so forth. Well, that's it for this section.